Hello there and welcome along. The Gardener Ben here with my guide to planting pot-grown roses. Now most of my roses I plant are bare root. However, pot-grown roses are available pretty much all year round and offer you the opportunity to add a beautiful new rose to your garden pretty much whatever the season. You can plant a potted rose pretty much anywhere during the year. However, I must advise caution if you bought a pot-grown rose in April, May or June, to advise a little bit of caution. Proceed with this video just with a little bit of caution and make sure that before you turn the plant out of its pot that you're seeing nice, strong, healthy root growth coming out of the drainage holes at the bottom. And I'll tell you for why. Field-grown roses, bare root roses, are lifted from the ground during their dormant season, normally in late October and November and December. They're often then stored and sold bare root through the season, and any stock is then potted up into pots for you to be able to buy all year round. Those roses need a little bit of time to establish themselves into the containers before you actually knock them out. So if you are buying a container grown rose that's presented as a growing rose in late sort of April, May and June, do proceed with a little bit of caution. Just make sure it's thoroughly rooted through the bottom of the pot before you knock it out and cause it any disturbance. If you are planting roses at that time of year that you've grown in containers, my advice is to plant them late on in the day, just as the sun starts to go down. Then if you end up with a little bit of a problem and the plant goes into stress, it has a few hours just to catch its breath overnight where you can get plenty of water into it to actually make sure it fully recovers. It's not in direct sunlight. However, you can plant roses that are grown in pots pretty much all year round, as this is my guide to planting a pot grown or container grown rose. And you're going to need some of the very, very basic equipment, obviously the same as if it was a bare root rose. You're going to need your rose. This one is Winter Sun, which is available from Peterbilt's, a really beautiful one with a lovely lemony yellow flower, which is going to produce blooms all the way through right into the very end of October and even into November if I'm very lucky. So first of all, you're going to need your rose. You're also, as normally, going to need some water, which I'm going to put to one side. I always advise if you're digging into virgin soil that you haven't worked on before, that you wear a pair of gloves just to protect your hands. You're going to need some well-rotted horse or cow manure, some soil conditioner or some homemade garden compost to improve the soil and open up the structure. Then, of course, you're going to need your standard fork and you're going to need a spade. Now, I'm getting on a little bit now, so I prefer to work on a kneeling pad. Digging tutorials are always difficult, so we have absolutely no idea what's going to be contained in the soil. We're also not completely essential, but advisory is going to need some mycorrhizal fungi. This is a beneficial fungi which bridges the gap between soil and roots and helps sustain a really good root growth at the very, very beginning part of your planting. So if you get hold of some of this, this is really good stuff. Right, once you've decided on the location in the garden for your rose and you've decided where you're going to put it and you've gathered together all your pieces of bits and pieces, you're going to need to make sure that you've got enough space. Now, Winter Sun is a fairly small and compact variety. I'm planting it here right up close to the path where I can actually enjoy its beautiful flowers. But make sure that you pay close attention to any reviews that you've watched of mine or of course, the growing advice on the back of the card, which obviously gives you the advice of how much rose the space needs. Right, we need to start by preparing ourselves a little bit of a planting hole. Now, we normally advise this hole is around 45 centimetres in diameter, around 45 to 60 centimetres deep. So make sure that plant has plenty of opportunity to get itself into what we call free soil. So as I start to open it up this hole, now this area up here has never been turned. So you'll have to excuse me if I work probably quite hard to get this hole opened up. I'm just going to push the soil off to one side. Personally, I like digging with this long transplanting spade. This is from Bergen & Ball. And I know I've talked about this one an awful lot in videos in the past. Has a nice long shaft and a nice sharp blade, so you can get right down into the soil and make yourself a nice planting pocket. Now, we want to make sure this hole is nice and big. We don't want to make sure that this rose has the ability to get its nice long, strong and deep roots right down into the soil where it can access nutrition and of course water. So do take your time with this. There's no rush. Make sure the job is done properly, and when we've got a nice deep planting hole, we're going to incorporate some growing medium. The soil here at North Lodge, as you can see, is absolutely beautiful. This has never been turned. It is coming away really lovely. You can see we're working on a beautiful beautiful loamy soil here with a little bit of clay in it. Right, that's pretty much my hole prepared. So about 40 to 45 centimetres in diameter, about 45 to 60 centimetres deep. Nice big planting hole. Right, now comes the confusing part. Well, not the confusing part, we skipped a stage, excuse me. Right, now we have dug our hole. What we want to do is we want to break up what we call the cap at the bottom of the hole. Now, as you heard me grunting away while I was digging, I'm planting here on a clay cap. So underneath my subsoil is a layer of quite hard clay. We want to make sure that we break that up. So you're using your fork, you're then going to break up the bottom of your hole and make sure that it is not all solid and hard right down in the bottom. If you need to remove any further media, you can do at this stage. Just going to break that up so it's nice and loose and fluffy. And any large stones, you can see I've got one or two here, I'm just going to take out and discard because they're going to get in the way of my rose producing nice strong root growth in the early years. Now, we also now want to incorporate some fresh growing media, something that's going to give your plant all the energy that it needs, so some fresh organic matter. All I'm going to do is throw a couple of really decent handfuls of soil conditioner into the hole. I'm then going to chuck a great load of it, about half a bucket, over what we call the spoil, the stuff that I've turned out of the hole. And we're going to just take our fork and we're going to incorporate that into the stuff that's going to be backfilled into the hole in just a second. We're just, I say, continuing to enrich that soil. Roses are notoriously deep rooted and they love a lot of nutritional value. They love a lot of water. So the more organic matter that you can add at this stage, the better. Right, now I've added that organic matter to the bottom of the hole. I'm going to turn that in as well. Mix that in so that's all incorporated and just not sat in a great big lump at the bottom of the hole. Now comes the really big question of how deep to plant your potted rose. Now, many of you will be planting own root roses, which are grown on their own roots. And many of us through Europe and the UK will be working with grafted roses. And you can see here on this particular rose, the graft point is just about here. Now, with a bare root rose, we often suggest here in the UK that you plunge that graft point, that union point, around 2 inches or about 5 to 6 centimetres below the soil level, just to protect it from the worst of the winter weather. With a pot grown rose, it's obviously already been potted into its pot and that soil level has already been established. So at this point you have two options. You can either plant at the same height as the soil is in the pot and then mulch around the plant over a period of years, covering up that graft point and adding a little bit of winter protection. Or at this stage, if you wanted to, you can actually sink that graft point around 1 inch to 2 inches below soil level and the job is already done. If I'm honest, in some places in the garden, I do a little bit of both. I don't plant very many pot-grown roses because most of the ones I buy are bare root because they're so much cheaper than a pot-grown rose. But during this particular video, I'm going to be planting this one about soil height because I'm going to go ahead and mulch around the rose, which is something I strongly suggest you do once you also plant it. Right. As I said, if you're planting this particular plant in the summer months, proceed with this bit of caution. What I normally do now is with my hands, obviously wearing my gloves, I'm going to place my large hand either side of the plant, tip it upside down, and with my other hand, I'm simply going to knock it out of its pot. The pot should come away nice and cleanly. And you can see if I bring Winter Sun into the camera there, you can see she's got a lovely root system. They're lovely, beautiful white roots stretching down into the bottom of the pot. At this stage, what we want to do is we just want to very carefully encourage these roots away and break up this root ball ever so slightly. What we don't want to do is cause the plant to go round and round in circles. Obviously, it's been contained in this pot for a little while, so we just want to rough up the surface there and break those roots away so they are not growing round and round in spirals. At this stage, you then want to take your mycorrhizal fungi. This is really important. This is a bridging fungi between soil and roots, and it needs to be sprinkled over the plant's root system while they're wet. So if you're planting a bare root rose, take it straight out of the water. While it's dripping wet, you sprinkle the fungi over the actual, the roots themselves. Obviously with a pot grown rose, it's exactly the same. I'm simply going to sprinkle my mycorrhizal fungi over the root ball there. There's no point whatsoever in throwing that into the soil. It has to be connected to the root system before it goes into the ground. And then I'm simply going to turn my plant upside down and position it in the hole. Now, So if you were planting this and you wanted to plant that graft or union point below ground, what you want to do is make sure that your finished soil level is around 1 to 2 inches covering that graft. So I'm going to be planting mine pretty much at soil level and mulch over the top. So just turn the rows around, make sure it's presenting the correct way, because they all grow in slightly different ways. If your rose is slightly imbalanced, if you wanted to, you can tilt it at this stage just to make sure that it's got upright in the correct position. And obviously with pruning over the years to come, you can also encourage the rows to grow in different directions. Now it's in the plot and in the ground and we're happy with the planting height, we can then start thinking about backfilling the rows, bringing all that soil that we've added, that fresh organic matter around the actual plant itself. Just bring that back in, give that a good firm. What I normally do is I ball my fists up and I put all of my weight down around the plant, and in a second I'm going to stand up and firm it in with the heel of my boot. You don't want to be soft and gentle with the rose at the moment. What you want to do is you want to make sure that it has really good contact with the soil. Roots that are exposed to air will die back and they won't be able to bring water into the plant. So you want to make sure that the plant has really good contact with the soil. So at this stage, I'm simply going to go round with the heel of my boot and just firm that nice and firmly into the soil, making sure that's nicely and compacted. Now, for those of you paying close attention, you realise that I've planted my winter sun rose with its graft or union point right at soil level. It's exactly the same finished height as it was in the pot. And you also remember that I kept back a little bit of my grow media. I've got half a bucket of mulch just here. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply now going to mulch around my plant, give it a nice dressing of organic matter. So it has organic matter underneath it, it has organic matter incorporated into the growing media that's been backfilled, and it now has a nice dressing of mulch around it. And over a period of time, I mulch my garden regularly, which is something I'd really advise you do very regularly as well. The benefits of adding mulch and organic matter in whichever way, shape or form you can are really one of the best things you can do for your garden on a regular basis. And over a period of time, that mulch level will slowly come up and bury that graft and union point by just a couple of inches. The plant now needs a thoroughly good water, which is why I've got a watering can of water here. You need to keep a close eye on it, even during the autumn and winter months. If we receive regular rainfall, you will need to make sure you go out and give it a thoroughly good drink. I always advise you give the plant at least 12 to 14 litres, around 2 gallons of water at any one time. Really drive that water deep down into the subsoil and make those roots of the rose follow it down into the subsoil. Make sure that you water it deeply and not little and often. If you water a rose little and often, you'll encourage it to keep its roots right up towards the surface of the soil, which will in turn make it a little bit lazy and possibly susceptible to harsh droughts like we've had this summer here in the UK. So make sure you deeply water your roses and add a lot of water at one time. You're better off watering lots and infrequently than you are little and often. We'll get that the right. So adding lots of water to make sure it's right down into the subsoil. I hope you've enjoyed today's planting guide, and if you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to drop me a comment below. I'll see you all again very soon. Take good care now. Bye bye.